Hello, party people. We are starting early. I am so excited for today's episode. We have our first guy on today, so Tim is breaking the mold today. And I just can't wait to highlight his brilliance and share the absolute gold that he has, not only just as a pharmacist entrepreneur, but as a human being. And I'm going to brag on him in a little bit. But before I do that, welcome. And for those of you who are joining, make sure that you are giving Ecamm Live access for us to see your name in the comments. And you know what? I'm just going to pull up the comments here so that we can see. So I know that I started a little bit early. I was talking to Tim and I said, I am always early. I can't help it. I think it was because my mom was always late to everything. Like I would be at dance class and like waiting for her. 10 minutes later, she would show up. So I'm always early. But anyway, if you are brand new, I know we have a lot of new followers and a lot of new members in this group. I want to just introduce myself and the purpose of this show. So every month, this Healers in Healthcare show is the last Tuesday of the month at 3 p.m. Eastern. And I come on live and bring to you guests who are brilliant pharmacist entrepreneurs. I'm actually going to start bringing on some other entrepreneurs too, because I know we have a mixture of different people in this group. So I bring on these brilliant pharmacist entrepreneurs to show you what's possible when you move beyond the counter. So this started this whole movement, this Healers in Healthcare movement, last May when I got this divine download to create a book that highlighted and showcased. I didn't know how many people were going to be in it, but I just saw a group of people that I knew. I wanted to show pharmacists what was possible beyond traditional pharmacy. So whenever we go to pharmacy school, when I went to school 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we had retail, pharma industry, specialty pharmacy, hospital, all of those things. But when you read this book, you're going to see, and when you hear Tim talk today, you're going to see what's possible with creating a business around financial planning or holistic health coaching or the variety of other different niches that pharmacists are now creating. And like I said, even if you're not a pharmacist, you have gifts to share. You have things that you can monetize. And I have created so many different programs and meditations and retreats and all of these different things. And we're going to hear from Tim about what he's created as well. But it's to really empower you that you can have financial freedom, that you can absolutely make an impact using your gifts and feeling fulfilled. Because I know so many people are feeling burnt out and they're not feeling like they're using their gifts or plugging into their purpose. And so that is the whole point of this group. That's the point of why I do what I do, because I was there too. Back in 2019, I left my pharmacy job at Rite Aid, was super burnt out, and just dove in full time into entrepreneurship. I won't go into that story now, but I want you to know that if you are here, if you are open and willing to be curious about entrepreneurship and using your gifts, monetizing your knowledge, I promise you are going to be led to the right person, to the right resource. And if you follow that gut instinct and you follow, hey, you know what, I want to reach out to Tim and ask him a question. And you just ask, and you don't need to put this pressure on yourself like, oh my gosh, what if he doesn't answer or whatever. You wait until you see some of the people. Like, go back and watch the past episodes. Everybody that I bring on here is open and friendly and they want to help you. So with that said, I want to bring on my incredible guest, Tim Ulbrich, who I want to just acknowledge because he has helped me in so many ways, probably more than he even realizes. And I really admire Tim because he is I call him like a multi-dimensional human being, because not only is we talked about this right before the show, he has an authentic heart that is here to serve, a servant heart. And I got that impression from the very first meeting that we had. There was no agenda. He's like, yeah, let's just connect and get to know each other. And he really represents the divine masculine, which we're probably going to wind up talking about today. So somebody who shows up with a strong presence and also can tap into having that open, vulnerable side. And, Tim and I, every time we have conversations, it's always just raw and real. And so that's what we're going to dive into today around topics with financial fitness and whatever else comes up today, personal development. So I'm going to shut up now because I can't stop bragging about him, but I will let you introduce yourself. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Christina, and very, very humbled by those words. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with your community. And you said something really important in the introduction that I don't want to
Yeah.
blow past, which is if you're willing to be open to curiosity, right? And I think that there is so much wisdom in that. Right here, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and pharmacy. Maybe we'll get into some other topics as well. But that is true in every facet of life, right? And I've really come to appreciate. I'm going to be turning 40 this year, the big 40 in 2024 coming up, and I feel like more than ever, I'm becoming more and more curious. And I had this false image, when I went to pharmacy school. I graduated in 2008. Quick background: went to a 06 direct entry program, and I had this false belief and story that, hey, I'm going to graduate with my doctor of pharmacy. Maybe I'll do your residency, and then I'm like done learning, right? And there was certainly fatigue there, I think, which is true, and many people can resonate that are listening to this session or watching the recording, and that's normal. But that really was just the beginning of the learning, beginning of the curiosity. And the more
Yeah.
I have leaned into that, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's personal finance, whether it's fatherhood, whether it's my marriage, whether it's, how do I be a good member of a men's community and group and vulnerability, all the things that we're talking about, there is a constant yearning for curiosity. And that theme is something, as I've had the opportunity, as you have as well, to interact with so many other interesting pharmacists and entrepreneurs. That is a thread and theme you'll hear over and over again: an openness to curiosity, a hunger
Right.
to learn, and just a humility in there is so much that I've yet to understand. Right.
Yeah.
And some of that's going to come through experience, but also a lot of that's going to come through reading books and listening to podcasts and attending sessions, like the one here this afternoon. And so I didn't want to brush past that because, those few words, there's a ton of wisdom behind that and the importance of that openness to curiosity.
Well, and I love what you started with because you always hook on to like that nugget that then we go on to the next point and it just keeps evolving because so often we were just talking about this, whenever you're starting a business or growing a business, I mean, there is like, the practical things that you need to do obviously, but
Sure.
there's also so much growth that happens internally along this
Yeah.
journey. And I remember doing research. I think it was for a CE that I did. I gave a CE presentation, I think back in January, and they were talking about some of the key intangible, I guess, qualities that people have who
Hmm.
are successful entrepreneurs. And it was creativity and innovation. That was definitely one of the top ones. But I'm just thinking of some of these other things like resourcefulness,
Yeah.
perseverance, resilience. It sounds like, oh, it's a soft skill, but that is key because if you think of, I always tell people to think of a house. If your house is not built on a solid foundation,
That's right.
it's going to crumble. And so not only is it about like the practical things that we need to be doing, and I'm not like bombarding you guys with all these things to do, but also just keeping in mind that so much of this journey is going to be growth and trial and error, and we were just talking
Yes.
about that. So speak to that. I would love to hear.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great point, right? Because I remember starting early in my journey. So quick background: I was in academia for a little over a decade in a couple different institutions. Most recently, I worked at Ohio State on a master's program. Started Your Financial Pharmacist back in 2015, which the mission at the time was to help provide more personal finance education literacy to our profession. There was really a gaping hole that I saw, and
Yeah.
through my experiences, really felt like we just needed a community where this topic was one that was more open, that was more accessible. And I kept hearing a lot of pharmacists privately say, when I would share my journey, oh, yeah, I feel that way too. I feel overwhelmed. I feel stressed. I feel frustrated.
Yeah.
I feel anxious. And we've really brought that, to the surface over the last 7 or 8 years. And certainly that has evolved. But it was, 6, 7 years as I was building Your Financial Pharmacist that it really took to get to the point where I eventually left that role that was full time in academia to work full time on the business. And what is resonating with me as you share, and I think back to that journey, is I thought early on that the tactical things were all the things I needed to focus on. And
Yeah.
certainly to your point, like you have to do some things, right? You
Yeah.
have to register, your business name, you have to set up the operating agreement, you have to go, get your employer identification number, you got to open your bank account, all of that. But
Yeah.
even more than that, I thought about, well, I've got to have a good brand and a good website and a good logo. And, at some level that's important, in building an email list and all those things. But now, as I look back, the thing I did not anticipate at all that has had the greatest impact and transformation is the mindset development that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that that's so hard to understand early on. And I think, as speaking for myself, maybe others will resonate with this, where it's like, I want the formula, I want the recipe. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I'm willing to grow and learn. I'm willing to spend time. I'm willing to grind. But so much of that mindset development is like experience, and you test something out.
Falling on your face. I've
Something
done that
works.
many times.
Yeah, something works, something doesn't. You launch a product that you spend months on, it's crickets. Then you do something else that exceeds your expectations, and you're like, okay, what's working here? What's not working here? Inevitably, as you grow something big enough or long enough, not everyone's going to like who you are and what you do. That's just going to happen, and so you're dealing with some of that. And
Yeah.
this internal chatter is something that I never, thought would be such a part of the journey. But it really is a blessing, because it forces you to really grow and turn in an inward way that, to be frank, when I worked full time in academia, I had a great job. I mean, pretty posh position in terms of income. Sure, there were stressful moments and seasons, but I was never challenged in a way that I was forced to look inward or have the same level of resilience, or to be vulnerable with other people and say, I'm struggling. Like, I need help, right?
Yeah.
I need help. And, I think it's hard, right? I'm not going to make it sound like it's, butterflies and rainbows. It's hard, but like, that is some of the most rewarding part of the journey as well, is that it's shaping you. I always say, entrepreneurship and my four boys have exposed every single weakness I've ever had that I didn't know I had. Right? Because it just stretches you and challenges you in a way, just like parenting does a way as well, where you're like, wow, that's hard, but I'm so grateful for the experience as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And as I'm 12 weeks pregnant right now, I'm thinking, oh, I'm sure I'm in for it. I'm sure I'm in for a roller coaster ride. With I have a dog right now. That's about it. But if you can relate, give us some love, give us some comments in the comments below. But I love your perspective, because it's not one of like, oh, like, why is this happening? It's a higher perspective of, this is actually shaping me. This is
Yeah.
molding my character. And that's, I always come from a spiritual perspective. That's just, I guess, how, like, to me, God is that stability that I always come back to. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing right now. Like, this isn't working. I'm feeling resistance, surrender.
Mhm.
Like, I have to continually come back to that, because Priscilla knows. Priscilla's on with us right now. I'm like, I talk to her all the time, and she's such a gift to me. So I really rely on that support as well, and people like you who are so willing to have these authentic conversations, because it is not, like, entrepreneurship is not predictable at all. So you
No.
need to have that solid support system. And I would love for you to actually talk about your men's group, if you want to, kind of tap
Yeah.
into that too, which you've encouraged my husband, and
Mhm.
Eric's like down there listening. He's going to sign up too for it. So I think that's so important.
Yeah, I would love to. And let me first build on something you just shared
Yep.
there, which I think is really important. The fear of the unknown in entrepreneurship
Yeah.
is I think what is so challenging for many people, right? There's the grind, there's the hustle, there's the long hours, there's making less than you made as a pharmacist for a period of time, likely before it grows. There's seasons where you may earn no income, there's seasons where you may take on debt, there's seasons you may, hit a home run. Like, those I think pharmacists can on some level anticipate. And if you've gone through an extensive, training program like many of our colleagues had, like, they can work hard, right? They can grind and grow something. I don't think that is often the challenge. It's the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
That is the piece that I think can trip people up so much, is like, what is your comfort level with the unknown? Because sometimes you literally are taking one step, and you loosely have like a vision of like, okay, if this step works out, maybe I'll go here, maybe I'll go there. But I've learned, like, after step number three, outside of a general vision, like, you just got to be willing to take that first step sometimes.
Yep.
And that's hard, because what we often see is we see the successes, right? We see the stories of, entrepreneurs featured on podcasts, and wow, they grew their business from 0 to $1 million over 3 years. And then they did this and they did that. What
Yeah.
we don't see is that for every one of those, success stories, even for those that are successful, there's probably 9 or 10 failures if they're honest, about their experiences. And through 9 or 10 of those failures they experience, what that meant as they've internally worked through that. And so that unknown piece, I think, is huge. And I do think that connects to something like the men's group, because this is stuff that I process with my men's group. We're meeting tonight. Every Tuesday night, we meet for 2 hours. It's 4 guys that I meet with, that 2 guys that live in Canada, myself, a guy that lives out on the West Coast in Seattle. And the challenge of our group is to help one another go deeper. We're not there to give advice to one another. If a man asks for it, right, it's welcome. But our challenge as a group is to help people emotionally process and feel, to stop, to slow down, to
Wow.
literally feel like, what is going on in this moment? Okay, so physically, I feel an increased heart rate. I feel warmness in my hands. I feel jittery in my legs. Emotionally, I'm feeling maybe a little bit anxious. I'm feeling anticipation. I'm feeling pride. Like, what's going on with that? And then what are the emotions that are unsaid? Where am I not being authentic with myself or in my life? And it's a safe place to bring that, to discuss that. And there is no judgment in that space. And it really is meant to help one another go deeper. And if a man is sharing for 5 or 10 minutes, it's all about, hey, what are some questions that I can ask? How can I maybe help them get out of their head, into their body, into their feelings,
Yeah.
right? Because I live 95% of my day in my head if I'm not careful. And when we're looking at, as an entrepreneur, as a father, as a husband, when I'm looking at trying to be the best version of myself, there are moments where I need to be in my head, but really I'm going to operate best if I can really be in tune with, what am I feeling? What's behind some of that? And often that may be fear, that may be anxiety. Sometimes it's deep joy that I just have to slow down and feel and enjoy that for a moment. But from that awareness, from that feeling, now I can be in connection with others.
Oh my
Now,
God. I need to just
I am,
pause right now and say, wow. Like, I just me processing, like, I want to join that men's group first of all, but I think that you're attuning with yourself, and that it's the, when we get so busy and all the distractions and everything that happens, it's easy to kind of like numb out or push
yes.
those feelings aside, and it's in the processing of that emotion that we liberate that energy, and then we can be more present with our kids, spouse. You
Yeah.
have more of that energetic capacity. It's almost like nervous system work.
Yeah, it is
So
nervous system work, right? It's a
yeah.
lot of somatic, body mind type of work. And
Yeah.
and
Wow.
it's just an important reminder of, I give an example. 2 weeks ago, I showed up to my men's group on Tuesday night, and one of the guys caught me. I was sharing for 5 or 6 or 7 minutes, and I'm just living in my head. And he's like, "Tim, I just need you to put your feet on your ground. I need you to feel the connection, feel your weight in your seat, stop, slow down, and like, what are you feeling emotionally in this moment?"
Yeah.
And just to get re-grounded, right, for a moment. And again, I think why this is relevant to entrepreneurship is that you're going to face so many different challenges, so many different things that are happening in a day, that it's so easy to get caught up in our heads, get caught up in this inner dialogue, and to build the habits and the behaviors, right? So for me, I've learned that this is not natural work for me, at least yet. I'm hopeful it will be someday, right? But for a variety of reasons, of my upbringing, of
Yeah.
lack of a development of an emotional vocabulary and IQ, this is hard work for me. So I need behaviors like showing up at a men's group, every
Right.
Tuesday night. I need my wife to know the work that's happening, to ask me some questions, to be accountable of like, well, how are you feeling about this? Like, what's going on? And not let me get away with a BS answer, right? That's kind of dodging the emotion. I need a morning routine. I need a meditation practice. Like,
Yep.
those things are so important. And I think these are the habits and skills for entrepreneurs that we don't talk about a
Yep.
whole lot. It's like, sales and marketing and business development and strategy. And yes, all of those things are important,
Yep.
but you're going to be more effective as a leader, more effective as an entrepreneur, as you do more of that inner work and focus on that as well.
Boom. Mic drop. So I love that you're saying this because again, it's proof of, how long. So you've been in business for how long then?
November, fall 2015. So coming up on 8 years.
Okay, so
Yeah.
somebody who's been through the trenches and done all the things and failures and all of these different things we talked about, and ultimately it comes down to a lot of that inner work because again, it's the energy of how are you showing up to your business, to your
Mhm.
relationships, right? It's not about being perfect; it's about being real.
That's right.
And I
That's
love
right.
how you said calling yourself out for not being authentic.
Hmm.
That was gold. I think that's really great. And I do this work too. I have a coach that, I'm in a group right now, and like, where are you not loyal to yourself? Like, these are the questions that I'm being asked, and it's constant. Like you said, curiosity. Back to the beginning, it's being curious and willing to learn and open to growing and
Yes.
evolving as a human being, and that's how you create a sustainable business. It's like being willing to ask for support. And
Hmm.
so I think all of this really ties in beautifully to everything of, being a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, and as you know, like that work doesn't end, right? And
No.
I've been able to see this firsthand. We were talking before the show started. My dad has been in entrepreneurship most of his career. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My brother's an entrepreneur. I've been at it for 8 years, which is a very short period of time. But I think in 2023, we run the risk of, perhaps because of social media or other things that we see somebody building something, and number one, what we see they're building probably isn't the full picture of reality. And number two, it just takes a lot more work and is a lot harder, right, than we often give the credit for it being. And 8 years into the journey, like I have learned a lot, but I do feel like I'm just scratching the surface. And there are moments, I shared one with you before we jumped on today, where I had this epiphany this week of some of the stresses that I'm having around the business and some of the stresses that I'm carrying, that is the inner chatter from morning until I go to bed, are problems that I have created myself, right? Either, expectations, or I've created projects maybe aren't prioritized correctly. And just having some of those realizations and having a chance to slow down and see some of those things. But I'm convinced this work doesn't get end, and maybe even perhaps it gets harder as you keep digging, deeper. But I think it's important that we realize, this work, this accountability, this ongoing journey, it's not a, hey, I'm going to do this for a year, right? I really believe it's, when it comes to business, when it comes to fathering my four boys, when it comes to my marriage, like getting better at any of those never is going to end.
Yeah.
Never.
Just listen to that mindset, everybody. It's not like a one and done, or like, oh well, I took this course and this is going to be it. It's like a continual evolving. And
Hmm.
like, I'm sure you're always investing in yourself, and that's something that I do too. I'm like, I went to Duquesne and did a class last week, and then I did a 4 hour marketing and sales, but I'm also doing other things. And I'm not saying this to overwhelm you guys, but I like being open and curious to
Hmm.
look at these things like, okay, what's blocking me? Where do I need support? There's so many different things that you can lean on. um you know Reach out to me. I'm always here if you're like, hey, I'm struggling. I am connected to amazing human beings like Tim,
Yeah.
who you're like, hey, talk to Tim. I'm happy to connect you with different people, not just having to work with me. But I think it's just important to know that there are people out there who are willing to support you, to answer questions, to direct you in along, something that the right path that could work for you. So
Yeah, and sometimes, as you were talking about the Duquesne experience and the, 4 hour program, it made me think of, I wasn't always an avid reader. If someone were to go to my mom and say, like, Tim's reading a book a week or so, that she'd be like, no, he's not. Like, I don't believe it, right? That wasn't me growing up. But I've really come to appreciate, like, constantly reading and learning, podcasting, attending courses, whatever is the method or
right.
that works for you. But yes, the learning is important. I think sometimes people hear that and they think, oh, that's really overwhelming. I don't have a lot of time. I'm working a full-time job. I'm trying to build something as well. I think
Yeah.
the part we don't talk enough about is, like, at least speaking for me, so many ideas I've had about the business and the next steps we're going to take that have either given me an idea or kind of given me the nudge to move forward, have happened from reading a book or networking with somebody or talking with somebody. And it may not be in that moment, but it's the constant process. It's the cycle of, always learning, always growing, always connecting with others, always meeting, that openness to curiosity and learning. And I think enough of that happens over enough period of time, the compound effect of that, you really start to see the fruit of that, which further propels wanting to do more of that, right? So when I sit down at, 9:15, 9:30, four boys are finally in bed, just exhausted, like reading for 30 minutes, like that to me is not a task or a chore. It's not stressful. I'm not thinking about, what should I be doing differently? It really is, okay, is there something I can take away from here that I can learn and grow in whatever area I'm trying to develop and learn in? And same way, that's usually one of the first things I'll do in the morning is read, 10 to 15 minutes, really just to set the stage of that bookends of the day of how am I growing and how am I
Mm,
learning, and really trying to see, like, Gay Hendricks talks about this in The Big Leap. We put these artificial ceilings on
yep.
ourselves for a variety of reasons. And to me, one of the most fun parts of this journey over the last 3 years is to just keep kind of breaking through that and to see what's possible and to dig deeper behind, like, why is that ceiling there? Like, why is it there? What's behind that? And then once you can break through that, you'll notice you create another ceiling for some reason. Once you break through that, you create another ceiling for whatever reason. And I think that habit to learn and to grow and constantly be in that, phase is really an important part of resetting, or hopefully taking off altogether, the artificial ceilings that we put on ourselves.
Yeah, I always loved that book. I think I still have it. I thought that it was like that you have kind of this baseline like happiness level. It's almost like self-sabotage, and then once you go above it, it's like, oh no, well,
Brings
something
you back.
like the car
Yep.
wrecks or something happens. So
That's
I
right.
yeah, that was a really interesting book. I'll have to look at that again. But I liked how
Yeah,
you
I took
talked
I
about
took away the same, both of those points. I kind of
yeah,
took away the ceiling aspect, as well as what you're saying of the self-sabotage, which I think go hand in hand, right? Because
yeah,
once we sort of exceed like what we thought we could, I think what he argues in that book is like our natural base is like bring us back down to the baseline.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many like that's a whole other conversation that I love talking about that as well. But I loved how you talked about habits and like bookending, the beginning of your day, the end of your day. You actually inspired me to start meditating. So I've been meditating for about like today I just meditated for 20 minutes. I'm not looking at my phone because I think you have like a whole hour. Don't you do it for an hour or something?
I This is look different. Sometimes I've done it like app-based tools. Right now, I'll usually do it, and I think it's important as we talk about routines. Like, this is not perfect every day, right? Some
Yeah.
days it happens, some days it doesn't. Some seasons for the young parents of young children out there, like, give yourself some grace, right? This is going to ebb and flow. Are children sleeping? Are they not? Right now, the way I'm doing meditation is as a part of that men's community,
Yeah.
9:45 every morning. Usually, it's a group of like 6 to 10 guys, and one guy leads a meditation as a group, which is a really cool, different experience in like an app where you feel connected, like with other men, even if we're all
Yes.
individually meditating. That's a really neat experience.
Is it just like is it a guided or is it just sit
It's
like actually
guided more or less depending on the facilitator, but it's a guided format. Yeah.
yeah, that's really interesting. But I think that, just being present because I'm really bad at like, oh, well, let me check my phone or blah, 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 and I'm really working on. Someone posted this the other day about like not multitasking, and I'm like, you know what? I'm committed to that. I really want
Mhm.
to just be present with. And I think of you. I thought you did something with yeah, like 9:45, and you set these boundaries. So I'm starting to do that too, and it's just getting into that state of presence because I get where you're at. You're talking about like these fear-based states and like the internal chaos that we create, like, trying to
Yeah.
protect ourselves and survival and all of that. But what I found is just really just being and tapping into the feeling, like it brings me to tears sometimes. Like I'll
Mhm.
just visualize the reality that I want to create and like tapping back into my heart. We talked about the authentic heart, like moving from the mind into the body and feeling and
Mhm.
connecting to your heart and creating and generating that feeling within you is just a game changer. I have really been doing that for the past, I would say, couple weeks, and it's
Yes.
just it
Yeah.
changes your day. So,
It really does. And this is one of the reasons I have been really consistent. Again, different phases of life, this has looked differently. But first thing I do in the morning is I take one of my dogs out for about a 20-minute walk. So I have a 1.4 mile loop in our neighborhood, serves dual purpose. Dog needs to go out. But before I'm into any type of work, before I'm any type of checklist, even reading or doing other things, like, I have found that my mind, even just waking up, like, the chatter will be going, and it needs like 1.4 miles of me walking just to like burn off, just to
mm,
burn off that chatter and just to kind of reset. And there's something powerful about being outside.
Yes.
especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, frustrated, whatever. It's that whole thing on perspective where when you suddenly realize like it's all going to be okay. Like, yes, the work that I'm doing, I'm a big believer in Tim Keller's work, who wrote Every Good Endeavor. Like, yes, our work is important and valued, but that can quickly slip into what is our identity, which
Yeah.
creates a whole nother set of problems. And so there's this fine line between recognizing that our work is important and valuable. However, we are a very, 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 very small piece of this overall universe. And our work, if it doesn't happen for the day, the week, the month, or whatever, everything's going to be just okay. Right. And I think sometimes in those seasons, like I find that morning walk, I'll typically do the same at the end of the day as well. When the kids go down to bed, I'll take that same 1.4 mile loop. And there's just something about like the quiet, especially in the dark of winter, in the
Yep.
morning or the night, and just regaining perspective on, okay, I'm out of my office, I'm out of the house, it's quiet, I can think. And those are the moments where I'll start to really recognize like, what is this internal chatter? Like, why won't it shut up? And like, what is behind this, right? What the heck is behind this? But it's really important because we so often make decisions and act, whether it's on our business, whether it's how we approach our spouse or significant other or whatever, based on that internal dialogue and chatter, that if we're not slow enough to really stop and be aware of what that is, like I think we often, I know I wasn't aware of how often that dialogue was really directing much of my day. And so having some of these anchors throughout the day, to one, to just be aware. And at first I would be frustrated, like, shut up, like, be quiet. Like, I wish this wouldn't, be so much of this internal dialogue. And I've come to really just appreciate, like, let it be, like, without judgment, be aware of it. Like, what can you take away, from this? And really doing that first part of the day has been transformational for me.
What I would say to that voice is, I see you,
Hmm.
because it's there to protect you. And so that's one of the most powerful things I've learned recently is when you can look at this inner critic or self-sabotage or whatever, that, that, the big leap, that barrier or whatever he
Hmm.
calls it, it's trying to protect you, right? And so it could be an inner critic from like parents or whatever that might be. Like, I know
Yeah.
especially as high achievers, we have that really strong voice. Sometimes it's like, well, why aren't you doing more? And da da da. And my dad's voice is like, I'm like, you're all the way in Long Island. Why are you in my head?
Yes,
But
that's
it's
real.
it's like, I see you, and
Hmm.
just witnessing yourself. Because I feel like when I was younger, it was like, oh well, just shut up, or like just get over it, or whatever. Like that was kind of the dialogue that I got whenever, because we're scared. It's right, like
Hmm.
some part of us is scared or anxious or whatever that is. So when you acknowledge that part and you can be present with it and say, I see you, it's going to be okay. And reconnecting back to that part of
Yes.
you, like you talked about the flutter in your heart, and
Hmm.
attuning with that part, which is what you're doing in the men's group, and supporting that well-being with walks and feeding your
Yeah.
mind and all of these other things. That's true healing, and that's how we can process through these emotions and the things from the past that are dragging us back.
Yes.
So it all
So
makes
so
sense.
um so important when you said I see you, right? I think it's,
Yeah.
not of judgment to that, but an awareness of it. I see you, I recognize you, appreciation and gratitude for the value, right? There's protection sometimes
Yep.
in that, especially connecting back to childhood or what else might have been going on. I think the next kind of phase or evolution I'm really excited to jump into with this work is starting to make it less um carved out during these pockets of the day, certainly
Yep.
building those habits still, but I'm finding moments where it's starting to connect in real time. And when I see
Yeah.
these happen, it's like, oh, this is amazing. So for example, like I have found myself when you're in the middle of a difficult conversation or a hard conversation, you can feel the emotion rising, right? Heart
Yep.
beats up, shortness of breath, you can feel the temperature in your skin rising. These are the signs. In those moments, like being able to both communicate with someone while checking in emotionally
Yes.
and seeing what's going on.
Yes.
Like I've had a few of these like in the last 6 months, and I wish there were more of them, admittedly. But like when that happens, it's amazing because most often, what's happening in a situation where there's conflict, every situation of course is different, is that conflict is a barrier to connection, and resolution without connection is going to be very, very difficult. And in those moments when you can both check in with yourself and identify what you're feeling and be communicating with someone else, like that's where the windows open up through connection and through vulnerability in real time. And, I think seeing people who have done this work for a long period of time, and you can see them moving from these compartments, right? Meditation and, 2 hours of a men's group and doing this work and doing this activity and this exercise. And I'm sure those habits continue on, but starting to then weave those
Integrate
in.
it. Yeah.
Integration. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I can attest to that because I had to have a difficult conversation with someone and I could feel like, cause I'm highly sensitive. So I like feel people's energy and like I could feel just the
Mm,
barrier and the hatred of like, or whatever was happening over there. And I just breathed into my body and I was like, okay, I'm present with this conversation. And I decided to see that person from a fresh perspective. I'm like, you
yeah.
know what? I have all of these judgments and all these things and stories about this person. You know what? I'm going to show up with an open heart and just be with this
Hmm.
person. And that can be really challenging when you've had
Hmm.
stories and things, a past, experience. So I can, yeah, it's definitely like taking that meditation and using
Yeah.
those skills in real life in your business because
Which
you're
is
going to have to
another,
go ahead.
yeah, it's another example, though, I think of what we were talking about earlier, which is like this work never ends, right?
Yep.
This work never ends. And I think that mindset of curiosity where we started, that
Yep.
openness to learning, that humility, and, even for some listening that, percentage wise, some people are going to be really successful. They're going to grow a 7-figure plus business. Maybe some will build something, it'll crash, and then they'll build something again, it'll crash, and the third time it works. Like those things are going to happen. But even for those that end up to be very successful, like there's not a finish line. The example I always give, like in our profession where graduates come out with such a boatload of student loan debt and the work that we do around personal finance, so many early practitioners look at like their debt being gone as the finish line. And it's like that is a really important milestone,
Yeah.
but we're just getting warmed up. Like this is a
I love it.
lifelong journey, right? Lifelong journey. If you and personal finance is such a good example of that because as you progress throughout your career and in your different phases of life, different challenges are going to present themselves. So, maybe early in your career, you're focused on, hey, I'm going to pay off these student loans. I'm looking at, buying a home. I'm trying to get started with investing. Middle of your career, it's, I need to maybe play a little bit of catch up. I've got a young family. I'm saving for kids' college. I've got aging elderly parents.
Right.
Later in your career, it's like, okay, I've now done the savings. How do I withdraw those? How do I do that in a tax efficient way? How do I live a rich life during retirement? This work never ends. And the same thing is true with entrepreneurship and with other areas of our life as well. And this is a theme that I've seen over and over and over again through the many podcast interviews I've done on our show, where those that have been successful, maybe not on their first try, maybe not on their second try, but have been successful in their career, this mindset around curiosity and learning is something that either is innate or it's been developed, maybe a little bit of both, but it is there consistently.
That's so interesting because I notice patterns too in people. So it's interesting to hear you say that this is like a thread that you see
Mm-hmm.
with these entrepreneurs. So you're interviewing mainly pharmacist entrepreneurs on your podcast.
So we do kind of a whole variety of personal finance topics. The pharmacy entrepreneur part of our show is actually somewhat new. So I think we're somewhere
I'm
around
on the
episode.
Halloween show.
Yes, oh, that's right. I think we're at episode 320
Oh
something right
my
now. I
god.
think I think
Yeah.
somewhere about a year and a half ago we started being more intentional about the entrepreneur series. We started interview some people that were monetizing their clinical expertise, which was just featuring different ways that pharmacists were doing some really cool things, whether it's
Yeah.
side hustle or a full-time business. And now we've more formalized that in a separate segment of our show. And I think we're going to start to, at some point, broaden that out even beyond, pharmacy as well. But what I say over and over again on the show is, when you hear a story, Christina's story, my story, whoever's story, it's rarely that someone's going to look at that or hear that story and say, I'm going to go do exactly what Tim is doing or exactly what Christina is doing. But it's about what can you take away of the themes or the behaviors or the habits or, what are the things that have allowed them to be successful, how they have done it. That's one niche, one problem they're solving. There's lots of problems that need to be solved. That's what business is, right?
Yep.
Solving a problem that people are willing to pay for. And it's those behaviors and habits that are going to allow you, once you find the problem that you're passionate about solving, to be successful in building that. And that's the theme I really want to come out in the show is, what makes these people tick and what have they learned about themselves, and obviously also the skills involved in building a business.
I can't wait for that Halloween session.
It'll be fun.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge Priscilla too. I'm say see all your comments over here. Yes, I needed to hear this conversation today. You got to do your own inner work. Someone else said, loving this conversation. So if you guys, I know we we haven't even talked about finance too much today
Which is
because there's
okay.
so much depth to who you are that we kind of just intuitively, wanted to have this conversation, but it's so rich with just experience and knowledge from Tim. So I just know that whoever's watching this, if you're still watching with us, that you are going to get just so many nuggets. And I hope that you take those nuggets and are able to implement that into your business, just like what Tim was talking about with podcasts. So if you are watching this and you have any questions specifically, like Tim, I don't know, are there common questions that you get asked or like anything that you want to else you want to talk about related to finance?
Yeah, this is fun, right,
Yeah, put it in
Christina?
the
Because I
comments.
think we get to talk so much in the weeds on personal finance every day. One of the things I enjoy so much about the work is I get to speak with probably a couple different groups or organizations each week, and we're talking about debt management or investment or retirement planning or goal setting or whatever part of the financial plan. But what's always behind a successful financial plan is exactly what we're talking about here today. Rarely is the finances about the X's and O's. At some point, we've got to do those things, but it's about, can you develop consistent positive behaviors over a long period of time? And are
Mm,
you willing to learn and grow over that period of time? Right? What we see is there is a huge amount of financial information out there. Anything we're talking about is not new personal finance news, right? You can read about Roth IRAs or student loans or whatever, but it's about empowering and motivating people at a place that they are then ready to take action and that they're committed to learn and grow over a long period of time. That is the difference of someone being successfully financially and someone not. And a step further, money is just a tool at the end of the day, right? This is something I love talking about. A good financial plan really should be about answering the question of, why do I care about this topic of money? And what does it mean to live a rich life today as well as plan for the future? And
yeah.
I think when we think financial services, financial planning, we think about saving, investing, building a nest egg, retirement planning, all those things. And that's important. But like, for what? What's the purpose? What's the vision? What are we trying to accomplish? And if we do that for 30 years and we're miserable along the way, so what, right? What was the point of doing that? And so, some of the most common questions I get to answer your question are more of the technical things, like, how should I be saving for investing in retirement? Should I pay down my debt, or should I invest or save for the future? How can I afford a home in this market where interest rates are above 70%, 7%? How do I do a
Yeah.
backdoor Roth IRA? I mean, all of these technical questions, but just like drug information, usually it's about the question behind the questions.
Yeah, it's
And
deeper. Yep.
it's deeper. So if somebody asks me a technical question about a Roth IRA, there's usually five more questions about, like, tell me more. Like, what's going on? Why are you interested in this? Where are you at with your savings or retirement? What's the goal you're trying to accomplish? And then you start to really uncover some things. So, for example, someone may say, I had this happen earlier in the week where I want to make sure that when I'm in my 50s, I'm at a point financially where if I either don't want to or I'm unable to work, that I'm financially independent. Boom. Like, now we're talking. Everything else is a technicality that we can then build a plan around this. But this is the vision that's going to provide the motivation and the momentum, financial independence of that person, what that means to them, what they're hoping that will look like. Then you can craft a financial plan around that. And I share that because I think that so often in the industry that we work in, there's just an I don't want to say over focus, because it's important things to focus on, but we spend 95% of the time on the technicalities, right? And yes, all of those things need to get done and we have to check the boxes. But if we aren't asking the questions about the vision of where are we trying to go and why are we trying to go it, we can do all this planning and we may not even be on the right path,
Right.
right? So we have to set the path and then do the planning once we're already on that path.
It's kind of the same with coaching. It's like starting with the vision, the why, and then curating the plan around that. Okay, like what
Yes.
are the needle movers that are going to get you to that outcome?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, to your question, I get a lot of questions, especially from entrepreneurs, about getting started and, how should I form my business, and should it be an S corp, and, do I need to hire an attorney, and all of these things. And they're good questions. Like, they have to be answered. But when you're getting started as an entrepreneur, like we need to answer some bigger questions first. Like what is your motivation and vision for why you're building this? Like what are we hoping to accomplish? What does success potentially look like in 5 years? What problem are you trying to solve?
Yeah.
How passionate are you about solving that problem? What sacrifices are you willing to make? What does your personal financial situation look like? Is it, to your point earlier, a strong foundation so that we don't build a business on the back of a weak personal foundation? All of a sudden, we've got a different problem where we left a good paying job. We're trying to go full time in the business. We've got cracks in our foundation on the personal side. And now we have more stress and anxiety around what's already going to be stressful and anxiety, anxious inducing of starting a new business. Right. So, those things are the areas that we've really got to be looking at. And there's so much synergy between the personal financial plan and the business finances and the success. And what I see, and I've experienced this myself, when you have a strong personal financial foundation, you can approach the business with the confidence that it deserves, right?
Mm.
Because you're not in that fear induced mindset of, I have to replace my income next month, right? You can start to think a little bit more strategically, a little bit long term. And hopefully, especially if you have a good coach, you're planning for some wrinkles that are going to happen along the way that are just inevitable.
I always tell people too, it's like those incremental upgrades. Like I didn't just start off here. It's like, okay, maybe you have introduced a new service and you make X amount. It's not that you're going to go from like 0 to 10K months. Like it's a gradual, pivoting, like you said, and
Yeah.
maybe you start networking or being resourceful in another way, and it's like it might have ebbs and flows, but it's like those incremental shifts that can help
Mhm.
you to grow over time. It's not just like an automatic trajectory of making all this money. So I think that's important too, to just calibrate the expectation of like you're learning, especially in the beginning. To what you said before about, I think you had started your business and then didn't go full time for 6 years. I started mine in 2012 and then went full time in 2019. So mine was
Yeah.
about 7. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there was a lot of work that went on before, working part time, learning, growing. I've
Yes.
I've invested so much in myself, and Tony Robbins events, Brendon Bouchard, all these different teachers, and so just to I didn't I didn't just end up here. It's a lot of, like you said, behind the scenes and things that
Yeah.
you're seeing like the final product on social media.
Which is a
So
good example of a mindset shift, right? Because I think I know I felt early on in the journey, I was in internal chatter, very impatient. Like I wanted this to work tomorrow. I wanted to go full time. Entrepreneurship was a dream of mine, and easy to say, obviously now looking, back on that. But patience was such an important part
yeah.
of the journey.
Hmm.
Not only in the learning that we talked about with the mindset, but also financially for sure. And what I'm referring to here in the mindset shift is one way to look at this is, oh, I'm frustrated, I'm mad, I can't, work on this full time, or I'm having to do it as a side hustle, which means now I'm working a full time job plus I'm doing additional hours. The other way of looking at this is how many other careers can have a six-figure income, often with a decent amount of flexibility, right? That you also then could build something on the side with
Right.
very minimal risk involved in that process. Not many. I mean, especially for people that are just getting started, and I totally get it. There's challenges within our workforce, within our profession. I know many individuals that have built something where maybe they worked in community practice and they were able to stack their shifts, to be like 312s or something, and then they freed up space and time to
Yeah.
build something. They were grinding, absolutely. But just to have that perspective of, wow, I've got flexibility, I'm making a great income, and I'm able to build this slowly and intentionally with a lot of risk off the table because I've got a good income in terms of
Right.
what I'm building. So, I think that building a strong financial foundation personally, so that if and when you do make that jump financially for the business, you're able to take off some of the stress of that, is just so important. And sometimes that means 7 years, 6 years.
Yeah, and I think that, if somebody is out there watching this and you're like, "Hey, I'm just lost right now and I don't know what, if I can do this, if I am in a financially good place, reach out to Tim and he can help you. He can lead you to a resource or go over. I know you have a
Mhm.
lot of different ways that you help people. So I don't know if you want to talk about that. And then, geez, that we just talked for an hour, and Penny wants to say hi real quick. Oh,
Ah, love it.
she wants to say hi.
I love it. Yeah, we have a variety of, free to one-on-one services available at yourfinancialpharmacist.com. We work with pharmacists at all stages of their career. So, we work with new practitioners, residents, those that are in the middle of their career, those that are approaching, nearing into retirement. As I mentioned before, those needs can be very different. And we have many folks that come to our site, they listen to the podcast, they engage with our blog, or they're active in our Facebook group. They use the free content, and maybe they DIY it. Some of them work with another financial planner, and then we have folks that decide they want to work with us one-on-one, whether it's for financial planning. We also have tax services that we offer for individual and small businesses, ranging from bookkeeping to fractional CFO in that area as well. So
Wow.
it's really a choose your own adventure. So, whatever is top of mind right now, certainly if you do have a question, you can reach out to me. LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to find me. You can also send us an email, info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com. We've got a lot of content on the site. So if you want the shortcut and just shoot us an email or message me on LinkedIn, I can point a piece of content to you if you let me know what's top of mind.
I want to just plug you too. Your LinkedIn posts are just so great too. It's just like you talk about connection. It's
Hmm.
real. It's very easy to connect with you. I always enjoy reading your LinkedIn posts too. So I just wanted to say that. And I'm sure I know other people do too.
Thank
Your
you so
posts really
much.
stand out to me.
I love writing. It's been a fun journey over here the last couple of years, but
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. And Priscilla dropped your link. Thank you so much, Priscilla, for being here and tagging everybody. I'm sure that if people couldn't catch it live, I'm sure that they're going to watch the replay. We're going to be posting this to YouTube as well. So definitely reach out to Tim. We'll leave all the information in the description box below. And any final thoughts that you wanted to share before we,
I
or
just want to
advice?
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation and looking forward to connecting more, with your community. And please, as you mentioned at the beginning, if people have questions or, I know finance can be a topic that, depending on how you grew up, it might either be taboo or it's anxiety inducing, or I'd
Yeah,
rather, just the whole thing go away. Like there is no judgment, there's no fear, in the community that we're creating. So I'd love to connect with you, answer a question, point you to a free resource, and I hope you'll take that step to reach out if that applies to you.
I love that. Yeah, I can really feel the sense of safety of just, hey, you're welcome to, just connect and explore. So be open and curious. That's the takeaway from this whole episode. So, all right, next month we have Dr. Mariam Yannikian. So she's going to be on with us. And so, yeah, definitely join us for, I don't know the date, but the September Healers in Healthcare show. And yeah, leave us comments. Let us know if you have questions. And again, Tim, thank you so much for being an excellent guest and for a great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.